quality is just going up.
Yeah. Oh, let me bring in the and go up to the comments. All right, we ready. I was gonna try something before we went live, but I'll skip it.
Explosions,
Huh?
explosions,
Yeah,
dancing
yeah.
girls.
Animations.
Oh, okay.
Oh, let me go to. Oh, I gotta. Hold on. When it goes on Facebook, it goes on up as private, and I have to make it public. Man, they be scamming me. Let me make this public.
They already know what you about to do.
Yeah, it's hard out here.
Y'all keep on talking ill on these good white people.
Yeah, you know it's my delusion that if you
That
could
you.
back your stuff up, then they can't really come for you.
Yeah, okay, but that's what I was sitting there watching that insurrection. It was like, surely the police are gonna show up and crack some heads.
Right.
All
Oh,
things being equal. Nope.
like I said, you know, it's really about the ideology. It's more important than the race. I know people don't like to hear that. You know, but we like to think that. Huh. I don't know if that went through. I'm just changing the.
Well, take your time. You got an hour.
Oh yeah, and let me take this off. Sorry, let me take this thing off. How do I do that? Oh, let me take this off real quick. All right, we're here. Welcome everyone. I'm just changing the settings on the Facebook, and then we. Oh, I changed it already. It went through. It just didn't register. Okay, we're ready. Let's cut the music. Cut the intro music. Good evening, everyone. This is Bro.Diallo. Q&A. Again, Deeda Bam has joined us.
What up? What up? Booyaka, booyaka.
On our weekly Q&A. It's not just Q&A. It's for questions, comments, and criticisms. That's what I always ask for when I give a public talk. You know, so to engage various topics, contemporary, historical, ideological, just pure nosiness and inquisitiveness. And we'll answer to the best of our ability based on our own research and understanding and opinions. And if we don't know, if you ask a question that stumps us all, we'll have enough integrity to admit that we don't know to suss out the answer.
You may be hearing that a lot this evening from me.
Universe.
I don't know.
So what did you think? So I'm waiting on y'all. Just type in your questions. So what did you think about last week? That was your first live Q&A, Deeda.
I thought last week was amazing. It was fun. It was fun. It was good. A lot of good questions, a lot of good dialogue back and forth. So it was interesting.
Yeah. Wasn't
was a
much
little
iteration as I expected, especially since our main focus is veganism.
Wasn't a lot of what?
And can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, since our topic was veganism, I was expecting a lot more shenanigans. But it seems like
people were really nice, man.
Curious and genuinely, you know, interested in getting some insights and learning as opposed to just hating on us.
And I was surprised to see that it seems like the bug eating community is growing. So that was interesting.
Yeah, I wish I had given a more concrete answer. I really wish I had given a more concrete answer on that.
Well, I was trying to stay away from justifying my opinion based on ick, you know, like
right.
So I was trying to be as fair as I could, but
you know, there's a bug eating like Men's Health magazine. They have they did an article on a venture entrepreneurial firm that is trying to promote cricket meat, saying that cricket meat has more
Oh yeah, yeah.
bioavailable protein, where they say as meat has more protein per ounce, but the bioavailability of protein in meat is greatly reduced by the limitations of the human digestive system, i.e., we're not carnivores. So they're promoting insect or crickets burgers for their bioavailability, and they're starting off with as protein supplements to promote it to people who work out, people who are into fitness and health.
Get you some cricket powder,
Yeah,
protein powder. Well, I
yeah,
mean, it's I guess what they're trying to do is they're trying to bring it to the American market because there's clearly a lot of places that cultures that do eat insects. So
right.
trying to make it appealing to the American uh, market is the challenge.
Well, the first challenge is how can they do it and generate an obscene profit? Because even if it's
Sure.
ecological or healthy, if it's not profitable, it don't go.
Right. Sure.
All right, so we got our first question. I'm going to read. Good evening, Sister Nadir's just checking in. But
What's
Curtis
up, sir?
asked, who do you guys listen to? As an example, listen to your favorite podcasts or YouTubers.
Ooh. Well, with me, I listen to a lot of atheist call-in podcasts and a lot of atheist call-in shows. I listen to a lot of Dr. Greger, Michael Greger. I listen to he does a Q&A. He's a research doctor who researches veganism, and so I listen to him quite a bit. Stuff like the atheist experience. I listen to a lot of debates. I like going back, listen to Hitchens debates
Right.
with that. But and I'm old school when it comes to a lot of the other stuff. I listen to some Dr. Clark, old stuff. Look up,
Yeah.
Neely Fuller, pretty entertaining character. Everybody else would listen to, but to add on to that, stuff like that for me.
Well, me,
Nothing too
I listen
exciting.
to my hands down favorite podcast is the Angry Indian Radio, Fourth World Radio. And it just last year they stopped doing broadcasts. So now I'm kind of stuck listening to the archives, but it's www.radio for all. And it's the number 4ALL. And the Angry Indian podcast. He was probably my favorite podcaster. I also listened to archives of the Bro.Diallo show. Forgive me, but
He
it's
likes the
true.
sound of his voice.
I get high on my own supply. I get high on
Oh
my
my
own.
God, man! Me listening to my own voice is like, ugh.
Well, sometimes I go back and so I listen to myself. I listen to my old broadcast. I listen to Angry Indian. He's probably my absolute top favorite if I had to just pick one. Um, who else? Other than that, I kind of look for topics. Sometimes I listen to
Right, yeah,
audiobooks. My wife has a subscription to Audible, so they actually have a pretty good selection of if I'm listening, if I'm not reading. And now it's kind of harder to get good books from the library during the quarantine. So I've gotten into Audible because I tried to do like reading books off the tablet, downloading digital books, and that just doesn't work for me. So it's probably Angry Indian. I listen to um, there's a periodic program called Project Censored. They put out a podcast. So for Project Censored, I follow their podcast because I like the journalism. I listen to Democracy Now! In the morning.
right,
When I get a chance, I listen to
yeah,
Democracy Now!
all that
So,
stuff too. Yeah, and I
yeah,
also look at a lot of science YouTube videos. A guy named Aaron Rod did a lot on phonology. I mean,
yeah. Oh yeah.
and just
Uh,
Yeah, and he
Uh,
was breaking down, just breaking down how evolution works, that kind of stuff.
uh,
You know, and I watch a whole lot. And I'm gonna be honest, I watch a whole lot of they do like these little shows where they do restorations of like Matchbox cars and old toys and stuff like that. I like to see how stuff is built and put
right.
together as well. So a whole lot of stuff like that. Yeah, and
So
Democracy Now.
Uh, Nadira asks, when are y'all getting on Clubhouse? I guess I'll start. I'm not getting on Clubhouse because Master P is mad at us. Master P said we made another one of them a billionaire, so he kind of shamed me. Now, no, the real talk. I'm not even sure what Clubhouse is. I've been hearing about it in the ether. It's
Right.
not that I'm for or against it. I actually went into detail about the absurdity of Master P talking about we made another one of them a billionaire and trying to shame the black community because some random internet startup got an evaluation of $1 billion, which means I'm not even going to rehash that, but I really don't have any plans on getting into Clubhouse. I haven't seen or really heard anything to motivate me. So it's up in the air. I'm not for or against. I'm kind of indifferent to it, but I don't have any current plans to get on Clubhouse.
But if we were to get enough people to beg us to get no,
Yeah, I mean,
we got to move where the people want us. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
But
yeah. If it blew up like that,
right,
Master P's mad about
P,
it, but
right,
I have to go on there under an
about it, about it,
alias.
about it. Right,
I don't want the no limit take on my
right.
doorstep. Now she asked, what fiction are y'all reading right now?
um. Well, I recently read, what is this called? I can't think of the author. It's called Friday Black. I think it's a collection of short stories
Hmm.
by an African artist writer. And I was reading that book, The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. I think that's who wrote that one.
That's
So
fiction?
yeah, I mean it's fiction. It's a story. I mean it's historical fiction based on the times.
Hmm.
Uh, and it's giving you insight
Yeah,
on
it's
the
been over 20
slaughterhouse.
years since I read
Yeah.
that. I thought it
Oh my
was.
goodness. Well, I mean the thing about it is like, man, to read the stuff, but I mean it's real informative because it's like society really hasn't changed that much.
Right.
Predatory lenders, selling houses with interest rates that go up, just how workers are treated
Right.
and how animals are treated, quite frankly,
Yeah, yeah.
and commodified and stuff like that, and all the horrors that go along with it. So,
Um, I generally read fiction in the form of comic books and graphic novels. And so I've been reading mostly Marvel graphic novels and titles. But my wife just ordered some indie Okorafor African futurism and fiction,
mhm.
fantasy fiction. So I think I'm going to, check them out as she reads them. So she ordered a few of those books online. So I think those will be the next book I read. But I have to say, I'm not very cultured. I'd say 99% of the books I read are nonfiction. Um, so, and the book I'm currently reading is "Who Stole the Soul," which is a critical analysis of hip hop history and how it went from something that was considered to be uplifting and motivational to being something we all know what it is now: face tattoo, materialism, and gangsterism.
Yeah. But
So,
I mean,
but
I like fiction. I've read a lot of fiction, and I would say some. I mean, Octavia Butler, her stuff
mm.
was like really life changing.
Oh yeah, I've read Parable of the Sower and the series. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's good. But I read them when I was in college. As I try to revisit them now, they're not as mind blowing as I thought they were.
Well,
But
because
for the
we're
time,
old and jaded, we're like, yeah,
yeah, yeah, I
that's
guess, yeah, the wonder is gone.
right. When you lose that optimism, it just starts being depressing when you read stuff like
Right. Um, I love audiobooks. Name some of your favorite via audiobooks. Actually, I like Dubois audio. Um, many of W.B. Du Bois books. So if I had to pick books, because he's very, very, very academic and long-winded. So, but it's really makes for good listening as opposed to reading. So, the Souls of Black Folks and his books on the history of Negro and Africa and the Philadelphia Negro. Those are, if in terms of audiobook, and I don't remember who they had reading the book. The guy has a real soothing voice. So if I had to pick
Like,
up a series of books, it would be, and also Howard Zinn actually did his own voiceover for A People's History of the United States. So that was good in terms of audiobooks.
yeah, I usually listen to an audiobook or something I know I wouldn't normally sit down and read. Or I've tried to read it and it's just like belaboring. So, stuff like classics. I like because I like looking at these classic works that our contemporary society is kind of built on. The stuff that all the smart people are trying to reference. You know, and everybody who thinks they're deep. But sometimes when I sit down to read that stuff, it's just like, whew, you know. So sometimes like stuff like The Prince and uh Machiavelli, stuff like those types of books. I don't know, the classic kind of stuff. Those certain philosophers we always hear about, Socrates, and those little. I throw those on occasionally.
Right. So Andy asked, uh, I'm losing. I got to find my mouse. Okay. Andy asked, do you have any information or insight on the Myanmar coup? So, well, here's the thing about Myanmar. My insight is that there are deep-seated ethnic, religious conflicts there, and many of those regions are much like the African continent. That area was colonized by the French, the British, Southeast Asia. So when those nations were formed, and you looked at Vietnam, Thailand, Nepal, India, all of those cultures are based on the caste system and the Buddhist religion. So they have it's kind of like a mixture between a theocracy and this. So basically there's a woman by the name of Aung San Suu Kyi, and she was a hero, and she got the Nobel Peace Prize because she was on house arrest because she was advocating for, well, the country's name switches from Burma to Myanmar, but she was on house arrest for many years, and people were afraid that she could be assassinated or disappeared. And she got the Nobel Peace Prize for peacefully advocating for Burma/Myanmar to go to a democracy as opposed to a military dictatorship. Then she was freed from power, and she was freed and elected as the national leader. And almost as soon as she was elected, she embarked on a genocide, an ethnic genocide. So now there's a petition online to take away her Nobel Peace Prize because, when she was out of power, she was the sympathetic freedom fighter. And then when she was in power, she was a bloodthirsty dictator. And so she's basically been mismanaging the country. The country had come under sanctions for genocidal actions against non-ethnic and non-practicing Buddhists, basic Buddhist nationalism. And so the military is like, yo, we're not able to get the money, the supplies, our political relationships are deteriorating. So they took the country back from her. And now they're promising to have elections after they ousted her because she is basically a bloodthirsty ethnic
cleanser.
religious nut.
Yeah.
So there's really no one to root there for. So when it's kind of like there's no one to root for. So when you see it's like a civil conflict where there's two historically negative power influence. The people of Myanmar are getting screwed over while these factions under Aung San Suu Kyi and her supporters and the military brass who really just want the money to flow. Because even when the politics were taken over in Myanmar, and they keep changing the name from Burma to Myanmar to Burma to Myanmar, and basically the military is like, we want the money to start flowing again. And this woman, because of her petty little rivalries with the Muslims and other ethnic minorities, she's messing up the money flow. So they're going to basically, I think they're going to kick her out of power. And now she no longer has anybody that's rooting for her or advocating for her because of what she did while she was in power. It's kind of like if they gave me power over Africa and I'm like vegan and liberation and freedom. And as soon as I get into power, I'm like, kill all the meat eaters and we're going to have dictation. I start getting billions. But that happened in Africa. It's the same thing Jomo Kenyatta did. It's the same thing. Who's the guy that just died in Zimbabwe? Damn. What's the Zimbabwean? God. Every time I start to think they're right on the tip of my tongue.
The brother with the glasses.
Mugabe, yeah, right. Robert Mugabe and the little Hitler mustache. It's right. The same thing. These leaders, when they're out of power, talk freedom. Same thing Biden gonna do. So that's it. My thoughts on it. There's really no one to root for except the people, the civilians, the people out of power.
Yeah, it's a power grab. It's a vacuum, So yeah. Whoever has the most firepower is probably going to win. They were saying that, it's a society where there's a lot, it's very fractured society. There's a lot of militias throughout the country. And so, that's what they're dealing with. They're dealing with that power vacuum. Who's going to fill the gap?
Right.
And who's going to win the support of the people, of the masses?
What's most interesting to me, as far as us in the West, who are very distant from that, is you have a lot of people in our community, Black conscious people, that think the East, that Buddhism, karma, the Tao, meditation, and chakras, and Eastern medicine, Eastern herbalism, and all the Eastern mysticism is somehow more humane than Christianity and Islam. So you go to, around a lot of Black folks and they're talking nonsense about karma and all this other stuff. But when you go to not just Myanmar or Burma, when you go to Tibet and when you go to Indonesia and you go to India with the Hindu, they're just as violent, racist, enslaving, discriminatory as the Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. So, if you base your life on a mass delusion, you always end up committing atrocities in the name of that delusion, even if it's an Eastern religion. Deeda said, what about Children of Blood and Bone and Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Nigerian-American author Tommy Adeyemi? I'm not familiar with those books. But
sounds good. Sounds interesting.
And Deeda asked again, what do you think of the executive orders recently signed? I assume by Biden. Well,
I don't know.
I mean, there's been a lot. He just signed 3 today, but he's signed like almost 2 to 3 dozen already. Most of them I actually, so many of them, not most of them, but the ones I'm familiar with, I actually support. I know he reinstituted the Dream Act, or the Dreamers, allowing for children who were brought to this country underage and thus became illegal so-called illegal aliens under conditions that they weren't able to consent to, giving them a path to citizenship, as opposed, because many of them don't speak English. Many of them have no memory of their country. I know he barred his revocation of the forcing refugees to confirm their refugee status and to appeal their case from outside on the Mexican border, as opposed to allowing them entry into the U.S. to plead their cases. I fully support that. I like many of his EPA. He's reinstituted EPA because the Trump administration had forbid the EPA to publish many reports on everything from the environment to carbon emissions. So most of but here's the thing about the executive orders that I'm cautious about. People want to celebrate them like they're doing something grand when it's just a return to the status quo. So it's doing something average. It's kind of like when dudes be like, I take care of my kids. And if you see a lot of people neglecting their kids and you see the man doing the bare minimum, that's not really something not really something to celebrate. So Biden and Obama are good bureaucrats, and not saying morally good, they're good bureaucrats and able to recognize what their limitations on their power and the expectations of governance and maintaining the status quo. I don't take that away from them. I haven't seen any especially alarming um, executive orders. I know black people get mad about immigration, but my position is as long as you live in an empire, you can't complain about immigration. The United States has military bases. The United States literally extracts billions of dollars worth of resources from the nation of Mexico. They committed a coup d'etat in Honduras. They're trying to carry out a coup d'etat in Venezuela. So if you're anti-immigration without being anti-imperialism, you are either a racist if you're white and you're an idiot hypocrite if you're black. So I don't respect the territorial integrity of empires because empires don't respect the territorial integrity of other nations. As soon as the United States stops exercising and functioning as an empire, that's the day I'm willing to talk about, well, these immigrants coming here. But most of them are fleeing U.S. foreign policy, and they have a right to do that. And sometimes it's safer in the belly of the beast than being on the outside near the claws and the teeth of the beast. So I understand that, and I'm not going to compromise my own values and ethics and principles. And because, black people are under the illusion that we're not getting jobs because immigrants are stealing them from us.
Good points.
James asks, are there any racist left-wing groups like the right? Yeah. No, not there are racist left-wing groups, but they're not like the right.
It would be the right racism is its own special brand.
Right. Left-wing racism tends to be paternalistic, meaning that, black people, Asian, disabled people are worthy of existence. They're allowed to exist. They are allowed some benefits, but they are not allowed to dictate or control or have self determination and power. So the paternalistic, or what is often called the racism of low expectations, that
they used to call it they used to call it the white man's burden.
Yes, that's left. Whereas the left-wing racists will try to dictate how you exist. Right-wing racists do not even respect your right to exist. And some people make that judgment to say, yeah, they want to control everything. The Democrats run everything and the Democrats do this, but at least the Democrats acknowledge our right to exist, and left-wing groups will let you participate in maintaining the status quo, but you can't have power. So one of those groups I would probably say is like Deep Green Resistance. They want to save the environment, but they have an extremely Eurocentric definition of what civilization, power relationships, and everything originated from white, and the problem is white and the solution is white. Everything is white. And if you're a black person, I've actually talked to some of the founders of Deep Green Resistance because I agree with their environmental efforts to deconstruct industrial society, to end the hyper exploitation of the world's ecosystems. But they say all civilization is bad, where African civilization and all these civilizations that the U.S. has colonized, has oppressed, has attempted to obliterate are just as bad. There's no difference between white and black. And it's very arrogant. It's very Eurocentric and ethnocentric. So they have some racist, quote unquote, white domineering, white paternalistic points of view, but they also are extremely left wing. So groups like that, the SDS, a lot of the radical groups from the 60s were the white radicals. They were out there with the Black Panthers, but when the Black Panthers went to prison, the white radicals went to inherit their parents' property and wealth and became middle class. Like there's a guy by the name of David Horowitz, who in the 60s, he was a hardcore radical and out there with the Panthers talking about burn down the system. And now he's a conservative who's talking about, personal responsibility and investing in the stock market. So a lot of times that's also a problem. Even if you have an anti-left group, have a leftist group that's not racist or anti-racist, white people always have the option to flip where black people don't. So, and there's an old saying, you don't enter into a struggle or a movement with people that have less to lose or more to gain than you do. Because white folks are like, well, let's join this movement with black people on the left. And if we win, then we get freedom. But if we lose, I was free when it started. So you go back to slavery and I go back to feeling bad for you in my mansion, so
Right.
that's the thing. So yes.
It's like the difference between cultural chauvinism and white supremacy. People on the left are cultural chauvinists. People on the right are usually, well, if they're racist, they're white supremacists. They think that white people, So it's like picking your poison. Which one do you want to?
Right.
But I guess they do
the
thing they
more dangerous.
Well,
because it was so seductive, so much more seductive.
Right. More acceptable. But it's like it's it's like picking your poison, which they're both racist. One just wears a suit and the other one wears overalls, I guess. I don't know. I think that's
sandals, right?
Right. One wears sandals and the other one wears
well, I have this dude that every time I say something about the Democrats or I say something about Obama, he's like, why don't you talk about Trump as much? And I say, because 90% of the black community is aware of Trump.
Right.
90% of the community is aware of Trump. Like, it's like if I come out online and say, we should probably stop consuming meat. And then someone comes out and say, why don't you tell the black community to not consume crack? And I'm like, because most people understand. There's no real crack advocacy going on. There's no crack commercials on TV every day, but there's hundreds of McDonald's commercials. So I don't go so hard on the far right because most black people, just whether they're politically conscious or not, have an understanding like that ain't for us. But a lot of black people get seduced into left, multiracial or white dominated left-wing groups. Feminist, that's a left-wing group that is extremely racist. For as far as the white feminists, we talked about this last week. Veganism, a lot of vegan organizations and movements have very good research, very good solutions for as far as animal rights and environmentalism, but they tend to be very racist. So, but they're not racist like the right. I think it's a mistake to say they're just the same, because dealing with racism of the left and racism of the right requires two separate analysis and two separate set of protocols and techniques. Right. And to say they're all the same renders us more vulnerable to both sides. Phil agrees with us.
Oh, thank you, Phil.
He said, yep. Demario, 1980, asked, outside of climate change, what do you think would be the next major catastrophe caused directly by capitalism in the next decade?
Well, it could be, climate change. Well, you're seeing a lot of problems with like companies like Monsanto seeds. And so the problem is that those seeds can become airborne and contaminate other people's fields. And the seeds that end up growing are seeds that aren't, they have a mechanism where they can't produce themselves. So that could eventually become a problem. And then just industrial waste. If people don't change how we produce and consume products, eventually you're going to run out of space and you're going to contaminate pretty much everything in the environment. So, and that's all directly connected with capitalism, how we consume and how we buy in our society. And capitalism, the incentive is to consume as much, sell as much as you can, create useless, meaningless, disposable products, and without any concept of the environmental impact on it. So if we keep going in that trajectory, but all those are connected to climate change anyway. So I don't know how exactly we could escape the overarching ideal of climate change, because all these little components eventually can contribute to that, I think.
Yeah, I would say right under climate change, I would say warfare and perpetual warfare. The United States cannot thrive or continue to operate without a boogeyman or conflict. They lost the communist threat, and they resurrected the terrorist threat. They went from Eastern European communism is going to come and kill us all or take away our freedoms to saying Osama bin Laden or Islamic extremism is going to take our freedoms. But since, the attack on the World Trade Center is over 20 years old, if you say something to the average young person in their 20s or 30s, if you say terrorism, it's like saying communism, our age, people our age, the Gen Xers,
They're
our
triggered.
parents and grandparents, if you said communism to them, they would collapse. Oh God, communist. But our generation was kind of the first generation where we were willing to say, well, I identify as socialism, or what's wrong with socialism? And we weren't afraid of the communism and the people who weren't old enough to vote for Ronald Reagan. They don't give a damn about communism. And people who were not old enough to vote for Obama don't really care, even though they're adults, don't care about Islamic terrorists are coming to get us. And in their lifetime, most of the major terrorist attacks have been Christian white males. So the United States has consistently, even before the communist threat, they talked about the Huns and the anarchists. They create this enemy. So I'm looking at the United States going around the world looking for an enemy, trying to prop up an enemy. They are looking in Venezuela, and they're talking about the Venezuela. They're talking about, they tried to turn this narco terrorism and drug traffickers into a state threat, but they, the narco traffickers want to sell their drugs, buy their gold-plated Uzis, and then go to their mansions, go to their compounds and have parties and orgies. They're not really interested in taking over the apparatus of the state. So I think the biggest thing is the United States is literally, as we speak, selling weapons to its potential enemies. They're dumping weapons in everything. The Saudi Arabia just made a record-shattering arms purchase. Eastern Europe is going back towards its own internal conflicts. Like Russia is now a naked dictatorship, and so the Iron Curtain could be resurrected. They're talking about Latin American country, Bolivia, Venezuela, and Cuba still there, and they're trying to gain them up as a threat. So after climate change, I think the U.S. it's a need, because if there is no warfare, that is at least 40% of the U.S. economy comes to a standstill. The U.S. military has the biggest annual budget, and the U.S. military is the biggest employer, and most of the biggest, like of the top 25 countries in the United States, about a dozen of them are either directly or indirectly related to the arms industry. And even this internet shit that we all love so much, they mostly thrive on selling intelligence and information to the military system. Mark Zuckerberg had an intelligence contract. Google and is also has several military contracts. So if the United States cannot resurrect a global threat to justify the engine of its economy, which is the engine of the U.S. economy is warfare and spending on warfare and the warfare industry and the warfare outputs, then that could collapse capitalism. So I feel that they're having a lot of trouble creating an enemy that will get us stoked enough to continue to justify the U.S. bloated budget and U.S. imperialism.
Yeah, good point.
And some other people say that the threat after capitalism is COVID. Or another plague, a different
another
plague.
Pandemic.
Yeah. Kadir asks, what insights do you have on ableism that is pervasive within our movements and efforts to dismantle the status quo? Well, I say I'm relatively new to understanding in depth about ableism. There was an article a disabled brother had written about able-bodied people using restrooms assigned for the disabled. And my thing was, I would use whatever restroom is available, but now I make a conscious effort to never use the disabled facilities in public restrooms, and just something that minor, and not using words like handicap, because that word came from literally disabled people having their cap in their hand to beg because there were no jobs available and no accommodations made for disabled people. And when I opened a business, I had a restaurant, And as we were building out the restaurant, some of the contractors were like, "You don't have a ramp for the front door. Your bathroom doesn't have any like the poles. It was wide enough to fit a wheelchair, but the poles for it. So, I was started to learn just through operating, and so I think that ableism. I'm not sure that it is pervasive, because I think ableism is more of a conscious, deliberate thing like racism. But I think there is a lack of education and awareness for people. So I think that, like myself, as people are more educated and exposed and made aware of the plight. I remember I used to make fun of these devices in the store. Like I'd see a banana slicer or a can opener and like, look at this silly object. And not to understand that those objects for someone, with a certain, neurological or physical issues, that a banana slicer is something that's very, very, useful to them. So I was never hostile against the disabled people, brothers and sisters, but I was very unaware or made ignorant, and I find people that are disabled or that have disabled relatives or caregivers, if they're more. So my insight is, I think it's more about education than and teaching people, as opposed to looking at people as being ableist or indifferent or hostile to the needs of the disabled community.
Yeah, my question to what's his name?
Kadir?
Kadir. I'm sorry. Um, is that how you're using the word ableism? Because I don't know. Sometimes there's different uses of words.
Mm.
I didn't know if that's exactly how he was using. Because I wouldn't guess that ableism, the way you're describing it, Diallo, is really a factor in movement. Like with Black people, I don't know.
Well, I'm seeing,
I'm just curious how he's.
yeah, being in the
If that's how
community.
he's using.
I go to events and things where I see actually, like if you, in the last few years, like I started going to the African Street Festival and the African Cultural Festival. And in the 90s, they didn't have any accommodations for the blind or hard of hearing or people in wheelchair. They didn't have any accommodations. And now every year I go to these festivals, there's all kind of supports and assistance for people at different Black and cultural affairs. Also, if you go to the Kwanzaa meetings, and I remember we were working in Kwanzaa in Kansas City for the citywide Kwanzaa event, and there was assistance and someone who was specifically assigned to help and assist people that were hard of hearing, people that had service animals and things of that nature. So I see, like, whenever because the way I take ableism is when you are consciously indifferent or insensitive to the needs of the disabled people, as opposed to, that's what ableist is. Like, well, who wants to be bothered, or we shouldn't be obligated or inconvenienced by these people. So that's when you call it ableism, as opposed to, I think most ableism is not a product of hostility or indifference. It's more of a byproduct of people not being informed. So, and I think that disabled people need to militantly speak up when their needs aren't met, and we who are able should support them in that. Wangisi asked, did you hear about the mumble rapper who had a $24 million diamond planted in his forehead and Bezos resigning as CEO? What's your take? And the mumble rapper is Little Uzi Vert.
Somebody was talking about some of the stuff people talk about. I'm like, I have no idea what they're talking about. But I did hear that Jeff Bezos was resigning as CEO. I mean, got his money and got out. I mean, in and out, baby. Whoop, whoop.
I think, Little Uzi Vert, his name actually is pronounced, when you put it all together, as Lucifer. Lil Uzi Vert, Lucifer. Little Uzi Vert, Lucifer. And there's another rapper, a battle rapper by the name of Daylight, who, was really thrown by that. Like he wanted to expel Little Uzi Vert from the hip hop community. First of all, but my take on this, I hate that I know so much about this, but I don't think it's worth $24 million. He claimed he paid for that diamond over many, many years.
I mean, what is like embedded into his skin or like a earring?
It's It's
Just like a
surgically
lump.
implanted into into his frontal lobe of his cranium, his skull. They
His
like
third eye,
drill.
third
Yeah,
eye
yeah,
chakra.
it's classified as body modification.
Sure.
So
Okay.
they made some anchors in his bone in because you got a pretty well, you have a sinus right here. There's actually a hollow hole here. So I think he could be in trouble because your brain, like all this part, you have these sinuses which are holes that are very prone to infection. You hear people talk about sinus infections and sinus inflammation, sinusitis. So it's in a very sensitive part of his head. So I think it has a great potential for medical problems. Number one. Number two, I don't believe it costs $24 million because if you go look it up, if you Google it, it don't look like a $24 million job. He could have come through my house and I could have done it, with some strong adhesives. I could have hooked the
you
brother
about
up
to
with
you about to
$24.
get you about to get mad people knocking on your door. Trying to get
Hey,
that
hey,
dime. I heard it, brother.
if you see me out here flossing, if I don't pull up in front of your house in a Bentley instead of my old silver Ford, then I'm about to go to jail for medical malpractice.
Right.
But it's going to be a wild ride. But I think, let me tell you this: I don't think that Amazon is a truly profitable company. They claim that Amazon, for its first 11 years, it didn't make a profit, and that it just started turning profits a few years ago. But Amazon's formula is underselling its competition. So the price of products on Amazon are sold at extremely thin. Sometimes they're sold at a loss, and they're sold at very thin margins. So their second business model is to undersell the competition, sell their shit for super cheap. Their second is to underpay their labor. And there's already labor uprisings throughout Amazon. That's second. Third is 24-hour or less delivery. So this intensive delivery, which is a logistics nightmare and is very
They're
intensive,
failing.
overworking. So the Amazon has overextended itself. Amazon has bought Whole Foods. It has gotten into movie production and streaming service. It's overextended.
Right.
It's a bloated dinosaur. It's a bloated monster. And the reason Amazon is so wealthy is because people believe I see Amazon everywhere. But the business model of Amazon is not viable unless it gets too big to fail, and the government will bail it out, like the auto industry, the railroad industry, various weapons, the airline industry. Unless Amazon can make itself large enough to where the government says, well, society can't function without Amazon. And it has a lot of competitors coming up, and people are looking for alternatives. And Amazon and Bezos is essentially a modern day real life supervillain. So I think he stepped down, number one, so that his personal villainy is not associated with the company. And he's also stepping down because he wants to leave on top. He doesn't want to leave a sink. So it could be a sinking ship situation, or it could be saying like, look, we're going to have to start paying people more. We're going to have to start charging more for our products. And we're going to have to be more realistic about deliveries. We're going to have to make people pay for overnight or express shipping or get their shit in 7 business days like everyone else. And if that happens, that means that his profit margins will go down. So Amazon is either about to do a severe restructuring or it's about to collapse. And I think that's why Bezos jumped ship. And if you hold an Amazon stock right now, sell.
Get out while you can.
Advice from an impoverished black man.
Right. Yeah, it reminds me of, like Sears and Roebuck, how they were all mail order.
Right.
And then, at some point in time, they couldn't sustain it. It got, too crazy. Yeah. So if we look at, if history is any guide, bound to drown.
Fail or change their business model.
Right. But yeah, I think he's trying to get out while he can.
Yeah.
And as far as like little Lucifer Vert, I'll defer to Rick James on this one. Should have never gave y'all no money. Golly. I mean, my mother might watch this. No, I'm just kidding. But it's like it's.
You're not kidding.
No, she's not gonna watch this at all. Anyway, but it's just like, people just find the most, it's just like leveling up. one-upsmanship, and I'm
Yeah.
just like, I'm getting old, so this stuff looks weird to me, like, but all it is just one-upsmanship. Who can come up with the weirdest thing to do, and
Yeah.
then once you do that, everybody's gonna follow the trend, and then the next dude has to, he got to put a diamond in his eyeball. I don't know. The next,
Yeah.
the next rapper is gonna, he's gonna have to tattoo his eyeball or something
Yeah.
weird. That's all. It's just silly stuff. Somebody
Silly.
with way more cash than they need to have.
Right. Exactly. Well, yeah. I think we should ban billionaires, but that's another. So,
Ban rich
David
rappers.
Goodlow, at
It's the real
currently
David
the
Goodlow.
population is at 7. I'm sorry.
I said it's the
Oh,
real David
currently the
Goodlow.
population. I'm sorry.
Say it's the
Oh,
real
there's a
David
delay.
Goodlow as
The
opposed to the
real,
fake
right,
one.
as opposed to
Right? He's establishing who his legitimacy is.
right. Don't the
Right. Don't
fake David Goodlow better not get
not to
on
be
his feed.
confused. Right. We ain't playing that.
Stop. Well, he is an actor though. I went
Oh,
to
okay.
see him perform in
Oh well, yeah. Then it's probably necessary to have that.
serious, intense actor, like edge of the sheets type. But anyway, this ain't his show. This is my show.
Right.
Okay. The current population is at 7.7 billion. You often mention capitalism being parasitic, yet the world population continues to grow. Does capitalism enable this, or does the population growth disrupt it? Well, I'll start with capitalism. Well, the issue about population and population growth, there's really no evidence that the capitalist economy is the result of extended life expectancy, whereas human ingenuity, human development, long before mercantilism, which was the precursor to industrial, the first and second industrial revolution, and then mercantile, and then economic, human population growth predates capitalism. So you can say that maybe it could have accelerated it, or you can maybe even argue with all the world wars and famines and death that
what could it be?
Subverted.
What it could be.
Right. But what they have found is that nations, as they begin to reach a certain level of social justice and socialism, like the more affluent countries, the Scandinavian countries, their populations don't accelerate growth. They level off, and women start to have smaller families and fewer children, and that the population growth are in capitalist nations that have not reached a level of affluence. So capitalism doesn't necessarily cause population growth or contraction in terms of what it gives people, but it does create instability and disorganized growth. And 7.7 billion people is not really, in terms of overpopulation, the world could sustain double that human population if we didn't live according to capitalist extraction growth. So capitalism doesn't really enable growth, but it does create the inability for humans to stabilize our population because
or thrive in the environment.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, think about it. You gotta have somebody to sell the crap to. So
Right.
capitalism only functions if you have people to participate in it.
Right.
So.
But what capitalism does say, well, capitalism is responsible for innovations that extend human life. But what we find is that the innovations that extend human life and create for human growth are always socialist. Sewage systems, like one of the biggest problems was access to clean water. Sewage systems were all publicly financed. All of the functional sewage systems are publicly financed, and we find out that water systems and sewage systems, when they privatize them, they start to cause death and disruption. Penicillin and medical equipment were developed in by public universities and publicly funded, publicly educated, and publicly supplied scientists. The MRI machine and other diagnostic machines came out of universities like the State University of New York by people who were public servants and state employees. So what the human progress and the infrastructure that we need to live and thrive without, shortened lifespans or constantly being exposed to everything, like the food, having access to non-contaminated food. That's not a gift of capitalism. That is a gift of public regulation. That is a gift of socialism.
Right. And I think that's the problem is, like, yeah, you have to fight for those regulations. Simple things like how products are packaged. At one point in time, you didn't know if you were grabbing a bottle of bleach or a bottle of vinegar. So they started making regulations on even how things are packaged. Right. So you could automatically identify, harmful things. But all those are, out of socialist movements.
Right.
The greater good, the common good.
Right. So
without an incentive for money,
Right. So I think that capitalism doesn't enable population growth. I think human ingenuity and human creativity, which is something that is inherently socialistic, because information and knowledge is passed on to different groups, and wisdoms and regulations are imposed collectively, but it exploits population growth and it hinders human ability to better regulate our population growth because of the demands of capitalism and capitalist extraction. So Demario asks, what are the top 5 misconceptions do you think the black masses in America have about capitalism?
Number one, that it's the savior. That is the answer to all our problems. If we participate in capitalism, it's you have that whole black capitalist movement where it's almost cultish.
Yeah. But I would say, number one, that it is that wealth is a byproduct of work.
The myth that
work hard.
Yeah.
Right. Number two, that capitalism creates jobs, that capitalists are the job creators. You hear a lot of that, that the capitalists create jobs. Number three, capitalism is responsible for progress and innovation, which it isn't. I don't know if these are the top. If you ask me tomorrow, so I'm just giving 5 because I really don't know if these are the top misconceptions.
People are just one good ideal away from being a millionaire.
Right. Yeah. And that anyone can succeed. Yes, that's another one. The myth that anybody that's willing to stick to it, and the fifth, I would say, number one, is that money has intrinsic value. That a $20 bill or $100 bill is worth $20 or $100, and the confusion of cost versus worth versus value, and they think that cost, worth, and value are all 3 interchangeable or synonymous things when they are not. So I think that, and they think that, another one I would probably put as number 1.1, not 1, but that capitalism is somehow tied to freedom and democracy. And that the capitalism is the source.
Yeah, the more we participate,
right.
The more we participate in capitalism, the closer we're going to get to freedom.
Right. So I'd say those are probably some of the top. Just
and that prosperity is a sign from God that you're being blessed, highly favored, and blessed and highly favored. That somehow that anyone who's rich is in the grace of God. Not that they're a parasitic scumbag, but they've been chosen.
Yeah, so just about everything a pro-capitalist black person, or that black capitalism and black capitalists are somehow more moral or righteous than white ones, or less genocidal and exploitative than white capitalists. Like Jay-Z and Barack Obama are better than Elon Musk or John D. Rockefeller.
Or that we would rather be exploited by. If I'm gonna get exploited, I might as well be exploited by someone black. I hear that a lot,
Yeah.
which
So
is bizarre to me, but
yeah. So Kadir said that Bezos is trying to avoid being the next Elon Musk because Elon Musk is riding his company till the wheels fall off. So, he didn't know when to call it quits. Elon Musk didn't know to go out on top like Bezos. Oh, geez. Mangisi said that I guess she didn't know that she was saying and calling down Lucifer every time she said Little Uzi Vert. You are invoking Lucifer. Wow. Mark Milner asked, did you hear that people are saying that Julius Malema of South Africa is controlled opposition? Julius Malema is the head of the Economic Freedom Fighter, which is a pan-Africanist revolutionary group in South Africa that is steadily winning local elections and rising in national prominence in South Africa. And they basically said that they're going to enact the real anti-apartheid black liberation struggle, as opposed to what Mandela did, but betray the struggle. Is he controlled opposition? I haven't
They've
heard
been around
that.
for a while.
Yeah,
that party's been around for a while.
Yeah, I think they are the inheritors of Winnie Mandela, because Winnie Mandela is probably the embodiment of sticking true to the wee Swayze, the tip of the spear, or the militant armed faction of the anti-apartheid struggle. But I haven't heard that he was controlled opposition, nor have I seen any evidence from his own words or actions of his party that he's controlled opposition. So I think it could be agent baiting or some type of COINTELPRO type setup for Julius. That's my opinion. I could be proven wrong. And if he does prove to be controlled opposition, which I don't see it, he's a damn good one. I mean, he's a really deep, what do they call it? Deep cover, deep seated agent. So I haven't heard it, nor do I see it, nor do I think it. So
I'm surprised no one asked about the what was it? The Robin Hood AMC stock windfall.
That's a scam. Ain't nobody asked about that. Thank God. Okay, Spear of the Nation. I was corrected. I think that the Economic Freedom Fighters, the EFF party, are the extension of the Ukhunto Weeswezi, which translates to Spear of the Nation. Well, how you in South Africa's business? You from Kenya? Get out of their business. I guess that's terrible.
She's closer than I am.
I can't joke like that, right? But we talking South Africa. We ain't talking about Kenya. But yes, she's right. It's Spear of a Nation. I don't know why I always thought it translated to. I read somewhere in some old dusty book that it translated to tip of the spear. And every time I get corrected, it's not tip of the spear, it's Spear of a Nation. People correct me on that. Sorry. That's the absolute worst. You so right about that one, Deeda.
Yes, I'm often right. Where's my wife at? Hey, where's my wife at? Huh?
No, you had said something. See, you about to take this down a path. We about to turn into the world star.
Somebody said I was right.
Right. No, you had said something earlier. You had posted, you're not always right. You're just well researched or something.
Yeah. No, I said I don't think that I know everything. People always trying to tell you think you know everything. Right. I don't think I know everything. I just research topics before I have an opinion about them. When I don't have any information or research on it, then I don't know. It's easy,
Well, Mark Milner states that we've been telling people of the diaspora for years that Julius is suspect. So Zara X believes that he is suspect. So there might be some truth that he is a sleeper agent or controlled opposition. And who is he controlled opposition of? Let me ask y'all a question. If he is controlled opposition, to whom? To what movement or individual is he controlled?
The white man, fool. The white man. Come on now.
But generally when they erect controlled opposition, it's like the US organization versus the Black Panther Party. You know, like if there's a movement against the people in power, they'll like Malcolm X and Dr. King. Dr. King was controlled opposition, or Marcus Garvey and W.E.B. Du Bois. They're not really, you know, if he's controlled opposition, there's usually a black faction that they're trying to pull people away from and get them into that. So they wanted to
Right.
pull people black away from black militancy and have them join nonviolent integration. So they
Sure.
started funding, and they gave Dr. King the Nobel Peace Prize, and they would bring him to
Oh
DC
yeah.
to take
So
pictures.
yeah,
So
who are they trying to drag them over? Those
yeah,
people over to? It's a good point.
right. So Kadir states that my knowledge of ableism is rooted in the use and conception of language institution, as well as the erasure of the humanity of those who may not be prime for plantation movement. Yeah, I can see that. But again,
Plantation usage.
I see in, but that's more the dominant society. Where you asked about black people in general, you know, black people often may not have the appropriate language or diagnosis, but I don't see it out of maliciousness in my own experience, that there's a malicious, whereas in the society, like in historically, Europeans have eugenics, and they have sterilized the disabled. They have created squalid, smelly, dirty, underfunded institutions to throw disabled people away into, where you don't see that history in Africa. In traditional African societies,
Mm-mm.
they literally had disabled gods, or
They
gods
would right.
who specifically, like Obatala in the Yoruba and Akan tradition. Obatala, who is the mother of the Orisha, the top god in the pantheon, is the god of this disabled and the overseer of the disabled, whereas the European tradition said that disability and deformity is a curse or a sign of the devil. So
Right.
when you look at European culture, so if you see black people behaving that way, if you follow their attitudes and perceptions back far enough, it leads to Europe, not to Africa.
Follow the trail.
So,
Yeah.
right. I'm
So
not
he's
saying ableism doesn't exist in our community, but I think it comes from either cultural contamination or ignorance, not from malicious attitudes. You know, white people call their disabled people useless eaters. And even Hitler, before he started slaughtering Jews, he was purging the sick and infirm and disabled and deformed. So that's white
so
folks.
I want to understand his point a little bit better. So he's saying that in the black community that we have a perception of people who have disabilities as being having less value because of our plantation mentality, so to speak.
Well, he's saying that the historically, like black people who couldn't be exploited as slaves, who couldn't do slave work, were pretty much discarded. But the erasure of humanity was happened to all black people on the
Oh,
plantation.
sure. Yeah.
All black
Right.
people were seen as beasts of burden. We were chattel,
Right.
you know. And in chattel slavery, you could get a larger fine for harming a horse or abusing a horse. They had penalties for abusing livestock and didn't have any fixed penalties for abusing or killing a slave. The only way you could get in trouble for killing the slave is you didn't have ownership of that enslaved person. An owner could abuse, cripple, harm, and murder a slave without. So, but if I did it and I didn't have ownership of that person, then the owner could sue me for damage to property, but not for murder.
And I
So,
generally speaking, my experience is that, black people, man, you go into any of your grandma's house, they got that big old bed,
right,
medical bed sitting in the front room.
right,
Uh, if someone has a cousin with Down syndrome, they had all the barbecues and all the parties,
yeah,
so I don't see that as a feature of our community as a
right.
whole.
Kadir say a lot of people don't recognize they may be disabled, or many of our people and even our conceptions of what quote unquote work means is pretty ableist in this class struggle. But we didn't set up what work means. Nobody asked us what work means. They told us what work means on the plantation. And when we were emancipated, they just redefined what work. We went from chattels, slave labor, to wage labor. We didn't make these definitions. We were just grafted into the society and integrated into the society. So that's not us. Now, I think black people, we need to re-examine and change everything from economics to religion to social relationships to hierarchies and all that stuff needs to be transformed. But that should be a part of it. But I think a lot is being put on black people that just not on us. That's not us. Zara says that, wow.
The
Zara says
ANC.
that the Malema is controlled opposition to the ANC. Well, ANC sold out 3 decades ago. So what threat does the ANC pose to the neo-colonial conditions? How is the ANC challenged? The ANC took power and been in power since the 90s. So why the hell would that be like white folks creating controlled opposition to Clarence Thomas? Why? Clarence Thomas is doing. Why would they be like, hey, we want you to stand up and be the opposition to Clarence Thomas? Like, well, why would you do that? I don't buy it, Zara. You got to come with more than that. It makes no sense, historical or political or ideological sense to me. But the ANC been a sellout organization. They freaking literally paid their own troops to kill African miners when they were striking. That was the ANC. So you explain to me. They tried to lock up Winnie Mandela during the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where they were letting people who mutilated and murdered Africans go free. At the same time, they were trying to prosecute Winnie Mandela for killing white farmers, and that were okay. Yeah, y'all have to. Y'all know more than me. I ain't. Well, hey, okay. Phil says, "My bad." When what Deeda said about how we teach our children that if you are wealthy, then you're blessed by God. That's poisonous. The natural progression. So, your question about top 5 misconceptions.
Yeah, I mean,
capitalism. Yeah,
that's pervasive. That prosperity stuff. It's weird.
Prosperity gospel.
Yeah, it's strange.
Wangisi asks, can we talk about our outdated labor systems, i.e. 48-hour workdays, and how workers can organize against it? It seems like workers are only on earth to pay bills.
Yeah, it's I think last time we were talking a little bit about the Twa people. I think they're in South Africa and how their society was structured. And I think one of the features of their society was like they spent probably 20 hours a week working. And but which was interesting to me because the environment that they live in, you would think that they would have to be working day and night, Jack, trying to eke out a living in the middle of nature. But it's down to such a science that, about 20 hours of work a week and everything is well taken care of.
Right.
But I mean, so the thing about that is, it's restructuring the whole thing, the 40-hour work week, even that had to be fought for, and once people started organizing the labor force into unions and those types of things, even a 40-hour work week seemed like a relief, and think about it now. I mean, how many jobs have unions? My wife's a school teacher here in Chicago, and I think we're probably about to be going through our 3rd or 4th strikes since I've lived in Chicago.
Yeah.
The
second one in 15 months.
Right. And it's all predicated on the fact that, right now the mayor wants to, send pre-K and special ed students into the schools, of course, with the teachers being there, and the teachers are giving pushback because, we're not just in the middle of a pandemic, we're in an upsurge and new strands being found. And, it's just, and, there's no, you can go to the grocery store, and the cashier has a spit screen, plexiglass barrier. They don't have those in schools, but you want to put people in a work environment where, let's face it, how are you going to expect a 7-year-old to keep a mask on all day? You know, how you gonna expect an eighth grader not to want to go touch somebody? You know, it's just like it's totally bizarre. So anyway, saying all that to say is that the teacher union in Chicago happens to be probably one of the strongest unions in the country. You know, and even that's like, you know, struggling. So you know, workers have to organize um, along, you know, goals that pertain to what their particular industry dictates. But I don't know. I mean, it depends. Like a 40-hour work week compared to how people used to work, you know, in the middle of the industrial industry was, you know, is a difference. It depends, you know, but it's obviously doable. People don't have to work themselves to death and working, like you said, just to pay bills. But that's capitalism. So we would have to change the way we look at property, change the way we look at ownership. You know, and that's fundamental changes in a society that would have to be addressed. You know.
Well, when you talk about, outdated labor systems, not only are they outdated, they're relatively new. There was a really good article, and there's two books I was going to reference. One is Cows, Pigs, and Witches, and another one was called Africa and the Making of the Atlantic World. I think that was the name. That was actually a textbook that I had for this graduate history class I took, but I don't see it in here. Anyway, it has like a long academic title, but both of those books talk about how, and then the article by a British scientist, not a scientist, a British historian who was researching the Mau Mau rebellion. Let's go into Kenya. She was researching the Mau Mau rebellion and the atrocities that the British committed against to subdue the Mau Mau uprising and the Kenyan anti-colonial movement. But they started with some early history. The paper in the introduction and the early chapters was talking about when the British first came to colonize Kenya. It was really hard to get Kenyans to understand the concept of working for money because they wanted the Kenyans to earn money so that they could buy goods from manufactured goods. And there was a disconnect because you didn't work to buy goods, you worked to manufacture and produce goods.
Produce.
You didn't
Yeah.
work for money, you worked to provide services and to address your needs. And they
Right.
tried to create that barrier between satisfying your needs and labor, and they created a wedge between satisfying your needs and your labor, and they inserted money and wages in there. So instead of working directly to speak to your needs, you worked for money and then you paid someone to suit your needs. And it was so hard that they had to go to extremes. Like they would tell Kenyans, well, work for money. And they were like, well, I would do work, but I don't need anything. There's nothing I need. I have a home. I did my agricultural work. Why would I go away from my home or my space and do more work? And they would kidnap the children. They did this in the Congo too. They would take your children away and say, well, if you can't understand the work for money, you could work for your children. So then the Africans would work and then go and demonstrate that they've done their work. And then they would give them their children and give them their wages. So this is a relatively new concept of working for money. And in the book, Cows, Pigs, and Witches, the currency that many of the Pacific Island cultures used was prestige. You were a big man. So if you had a skill, if you were a craftsman, you didn't really work for money to buy food, and you didn't even really work for food because they had divisions of labor where you didn't have to produce your own food, because they said primitive societies, everybody had to make their own shelter, produce their own food. If you would work for prestige and standing in the society. So if I developed a skill, if I was an artist, I would be the reverence that the people would have, like, wow, you the dopest MC. But everybody gonna eat. Everybody gets fed. Everybody gets a shelter. Everybody gets clothing. And if you want anything above and beyond that, all you have is our gratitude and admiration. And during the festival, you can sit at the big table, or during the festival, you can lead the dance. or during the rituals, you get to play the drum or ignite the ceremonial fire. So you would have ceremonial, but there wasn't this situation where somebody had so much money and control over other people's lives and had the ability to define. So much of human history and much of human development has been without this concept of wage labor and hierarchies of labor. And to the Europeans, with their monarchical and mercantile and feudal and peasantry and serfs, they came with those strict, violent hierarchies. So when we learn the history, it will help direct us and give us a reality where Dr. Clark would always talk about this in his history about how Africans did things without creating hierarchies or markets, and where Europeans corrupted the concept of a king, because Europeans had the concept of a absolute monarch and the concept of an absolute monarch. And so when they came to Africa and they saw people with authority, like, hey, do that. Nah, put that down, pick that up. They were like, you're the king. And the Africans were like, what? We're going to negotiate with you. You're the king. You know, and they came
and
to
they're
Native
like, yes,
Americans.
yes, I am.
Right. They came
I
to
am
the
the king.
Americans. It's like, take me to your leader. They were literally aliens saying, take me to your leader. And many of the times the nations were like, our leader. And they would take them to the shaman or take them to the elder or something.
The oldest dude there.
They would be like, we're going to take this land. We're going to sign this treaty. And the people are like, and the guy's like, whatever. I don't speak English and I don't read. We're a oral culture. So the best thing we can do is show how this labor system is a pure invention of a psychotic mind and a dysfunctional culture, and that societies have existed without it and societies can exist without it. That we can stop wage labor and end wage labor if we basically define labor in terms of service. You don't work for money, you work to provide a service to meet human needs. And that human needs should be the drive of the economy, not the accumulation of money. And there are even many European scholars, anarcho syndicalists and anarchists and primitivists that they call them. Many Europeans are adopting this concept, and it's really a shame. Whereas in Haiti and in Africa, you have cutthroat capitalism and everybody's trying to secure the bag, and then many Europeans and the children of the capitalists are developing this bohemian, new age, paganistic, that they call, like, we have new ways of relating to the world, and, you know, trying to, I give up money, or like when Will Smith said his son doesn't care about money. So old economies were based off symbiosis, interlocked needs and desires, whereas modern economies are based off of domination and conquest. And the alternative, they tell us, well, if you don't do this, you're going to be poor and everybody's going to be poor. So you better be happy with a few people having everything, or everybody will have nothing. And that's a myth. So we need a revolution, and we need to better educate our people, you know, but education first. Zara says Julius Malema is selling the idea of revolutionary organization against the ANC having sold out because we are starting to reject the ANC. The EFS is known as Gucci revolutionaries. Okay. All right.
I don't know enough about it
to debate you. I just know that there's at least 30 years history of ANC selling out. And Gucci, you talk about Gucci. How much was Mandela worth at the time of his death? You know, how many labor uprisings and riots in the former Bantu stands and in the shanties? How many promises did the ANC fall short on? How many racist murderers and assassins and mutilators did the ANC allow to go free and walk freely in the street? There's a European journalist by the name of John Pilger who talked about who went into communities. How many racist boarded white communities still exist in Africa? How much land has the ANC because EFF is coming into power, but the ANC has been into power. And if the ANC had spoke to the needs of the people, there wouldn't be no EFF. The ANC created the condition that gave birth to the EFF. So again, I mean, I ain't gonna keep going back and forth about it. I don't see evidence, and your explanations don't hold up, especially when you talk about the EFF. But Mark said, Diallo, do you think that African Americans setting up a base of operations in Africa, like Israel, for the diaspora is a good idea? Absolutely not. We shouldn't do it. Everything's the opposite. No, I don't think the African Americans setting up a base of
You
operations in
don't. You're saying we shouldn't follow the Israel
no,
model.
no. And that has actually been done in the nation of Liberia. There were a group of African Americans who traveled to Africa to begin the process of colonizing Africa and creating discriminatory laws and committing everything from lynching the native African population to exploiting the labor and expropriating the land of resources. Liberia to this day is the first nation that rolled out the red carpet and accepted a U.S. foreign military base on African soil. So Liberia has always been an Uncle Tom sellout nation and a tool. So no, and that's all that Israel is the 51st state. Israel is a proxy nation of the United States. So absolutely not. It's not a good idea. In fact, it's probably one of the worst ideas for African empowerment I've ever heard in my life. If you want.
The first president of Liberia was a former slave of Robert E. Lee.
Right.
So,
and he learned a lot from his master and went there and started to implement. Right. And Liberia had the first Black female head of state. And one of her first rules was to give an invitation, because AFRICOM, Africa Command, the U.S. military operations on the African continent were based in Germany. And she petitioned to have the Pentagon relocate the base from Germany and bring it to Liberia. So I have a lot of issues with Liberia. Kadir states, I don't think it was on us either. We served as this moral scapegoat for everything, just thinking that we have to acknowledge how ableism affects with the need for class analysis as well. I agree.
Yeah. I mean, right. Ableism explained how you guys explained it. And like I said, just, even our own casual observations, we know that Black people really don't get down like that.
Right.
We accept everybody.
Right.
One of the coolest guys in our high school was this Black guy, and he had a small hand. I don't know what the condition might have been, but I mean, he had the prettiest girlfriend. I mean, my brother was doing it. He had good hair. Had the waves laid down.
So Zara states that she's not elevating the ANC. She's saying they're both trash. Well, I don't know if the EFF is trash, but I know if they're both trash, then the ANC is that old putrid trash that's been sitting in the musty sun for days and days and days.
One's a dumpster, another one's a trash can.
But EFF is composted. So I guess that's a good to leave on, that we agree. Thumbs up. Feel and no apartheid either. So yes, it's 9. So we've gone over. Thank you for everyone with questions. You want to give your contact if people want to continue to engage with you via the internet or show up at your house for a delicious vegan meal?
What's your address again? Yeah,
you first.
47th Street.
Word. So yeah, you could just find me on Instagram at Deeda Bam. Deeda Bam on YouTube. I do some interesting stuff with exercise, and I play capoeira with my kids, and we do a lot of cool stuff. I was having a conversation with somebody today. They were making fun of the cereal that I get my kids to eat. They were amazed how I was able to get them to eat that kind of stuff. So yeah, Deeda Bam on Instagram, Deeda Bam Kid on YouTube, and Charles Fletcher DeShields on Facebook.
All right, and it's at Diallo Kenyatta across social media platforms. If you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you're watching this on Facebook, welcome and appreciate you. Thanks for everyone's questions. Sorry about the people whose questions I couldn't get to. We had questions about China Empire, Ethiopia, and vegan food, but we appreciate you. So please tune in. I do these discussions every Wednesday at 8 p.m. for the time being. And if the time and location or whatever change, I'll let you know. I appreciate everybody. So good night to everyone, and be safe. Wear a mask, and stop eating swine.
And get refined.